record on this computer. Okay, we're recording.
Lovely.
Hey everybody, my name is Chris Anderson from Science Around Cincy, and as you can see, I am in my house. That's because I'm doing my best to social distance while we are still working through the COVID pandemic, and we want to make sure that I'm not getting sick, but I'm also just on the off chance I do get infected, we don't want to spread that to anybody else if I'm not showing symptoms. But we do have a light at the end of our tunnel, is that there's several vaccines that have shown to be effective in preventing people from getting sick with COVID. And today we get a chance to talk to a scientist who's been working on such a vaccine, Dr. Maggie Powers Fletcher. Maggie, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here talking with you about this topic.
Yeah. So how does this vaccine work?
Yes. So the study that we are working on and that we're part of at the University of Cincinnati and UC Health is the Moderna vaccine. So you're going to hear a lot of different vaccines that are out there. There's so many candidates, so many types of vaccines that are evaluated, and they all work in slightly different ways. So the vaccine that we are working on and that we're studying is an mRNA vaccine. And so this
mRNA.
is mRNA. Yeah. So
Okay.
that stands for messenger RNA or messenger ribonucleic acid. And so
Okay.
when we think about the building, the pieces that put our cells together, right? So we think about gene sequences and nucleic acid. There's this code that our body has that tells all of our cells, this is how you make protein. This is how you make all of the parts you need to function.
And that would be DNA.
DNA, perfect. So
Okay.
deoxyribonucleic acid. And so with DNA, that's the code we keep. That's what we have. But to get it into protein, it has to give a message, and it has to give that messenger RNA. And so what our cells do is take the DNA sequence and make it into RNA, make it into messenger RNA. And what that says is, okay, cell, now put all these pieces together to make a protein. And so
Okay.
our bodies are used to, our cells use that system. They know how to recognize messenger RNA. When viruses come in and infect our body, some of the ways they infect us is by kind of taking over our system, making use of the things that we have in our cells in order to replicate themselves. And so the way a human cell and a virus cell interact might have some related things, and using that same type of messenger RNA. And so what this vaccine does, and it's really neat, there aren't any vaccines that are currently approved that use it. So this is a really novel, groundbreaking application of this to find a solution. And what it does is it takes a piece of messenger RNA that the scientists created that represent the spike protein, so a specific part of the virus, and it introduces that to our cells. And our cells make it like they would any other type of messenger RNA. And our cells start making just this spike protein, just this little piece of the virus. And the reason scientists use this piece of the virus is they found that that was a piece that really caused a strong immune response in the human host. And so they want to make that little piece. That piece gets made by our cells, and all of those immune cells that recognize the bad triggers that tell your body something is wrong here. I need to make antibodies. I need to make other cell responses. That piece gets made, and it elicits this immune response and turns everything on. And then what's really neat about this is that little message eventually goes away. It gets broken down by the cell. So you'll hear, sometimes people talking about genetic modifications or gene therapy. This is not that. And that's really important to know, that we're not putting in a little piece of message that goes into your genes and stays with you forever. It's this little message that just is there for a little bit, makes the protein, triggers an immune response, and then goes away.
So let me get this straight, because when I was a teacher, I like to explain like the differences between like the DNA and RNA. So like your DNA is like your reference book, and your mRNA is like a photocopy, because you don't want to hurt the book or damage the book. So you make a photocopy, and that tells you how to make a protein. And so what this this vaccine does, it's just like handing out photocopies to your cells to
Photocopies for
make
everyone.
this everybody. Yeah, you're getting a copy, you're getting a copy, you're getting a copy, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And it tells your cells how to make this like one protein on the outside of the virus.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So it's the part. So when we think of coronavirus, so remember the virus causing COVID-19 is a coronavirus, similar to the same structure of viruses that just cause a common cold, but there's something about this one that's particularly bad. And it's named coronavirus for the corona, a crown or a halo. And so if you look under a microscope, it's got these points, these little spiky parts around the outside.
So it looks like a tiara almost around the virus.
A virus with a tiara.
Okay.
And that little piece of the virus is really important for when it tries to attach to our cells and tries to enter the cells. It's really important for that. And it's right on the outside. So it's what our immune system, what those cells in our body see first when they interact.
And that helps our immune system recognize that it's a virus and not like part of our body.
Something normal, yeah. So our immune systems are constantly trying to balance what's normal, what's not. And that's why you have diseases where sometimes your immune system gets too excited and goes a little crazy, and other times where our immune system isn't working that well because it's not recognizing what's abnormal.
So your immune system's kind of like the bouncers in a club, right? They're looking for people who shouldn't be there, and they take them out. Okay.
Yep. And there's different, there's different players, right? So there's some people that act right away and say, "No way, get out of here." People that are a bit more refined in their approach.
Okay. So this vaccine then takes it's this photocopy, this mRNA, and it tells your cells to make this protein, and it gets your immune system to respond to it and recognize it, so that way if it does come across the virus, if you do get infected, it can take it out right away.
Yep. It says, "I've seen you before, I'm ready." And that's what the whole idea of vaccines, that's the goal there. So your immune system has that chance. I've seen you before, I know that you're bad, and it can respond more strongly and more quickly to get rid of something.
Cool. That's pretty awesome. And like you said, no one's ever done this before.
Exactly. And so that's why it's really exciting.
Go ahead. Yeah. So what has been one of the biggest challenges with this novel virus? It's because you guys have we've worked on a novel vaccine for a novel virus. What's been the biggest challenge with that? Because you're going into the unknown, really.
Yeah, you really are. And so there's definitely been some challenges, but I would say there's also been some real success stories, right? So when you think about when these first cases of disease were identified, it was within a relatively short time that we identified it was a virus causing disease, right? So when we think about some pandemics, the 1918, you'll hear about the 1918 influenza. At the beginning, we didn't even know it was a virus. We were just trying to figure out what the heck it was. So very quickly, we knew it was a virus. Very quickly, we knew the sequence. So again, talking about those genetic codes, pretty quickly, we knew what the code was. And thankfully, because of research that had been done for other outbreaks, so SARS and MERS, so Middle East respiratory virus, two very related outbreaks, we had a foundation of knowledge. We knew about this spike protein already. And so that thankfully were some success stories that helped us move so quickly to where we are today. There are still things we don't understand about why certain people get so sick, or how long does an immune response last. So we talk about, these making sure your immune system recognizes something as being foreign or bad really quickly. We don't know how long that lasts. And so does your immune system, for lack of better words, forget? And so that's something that's still really unknown and a challenge about that. We also didn't initially know, okay, if we can get your immune system to make antibodies, that's a real big player here in protecting is making antibodies, which are something that help bind to something that is foreign or unknown and create a bigger flag. So it binds and says, hey, I'm unusual. Look at me, look at me. And so what we didn't know is if those antibodies would protect it. And so that's something we've been learning about during this process.
So it could be that we may need to get a vaccine each year to kind of give us a boost, kind of like the flu shot. I got my flu shot the other day.
Exactly.
It was great.
Right. Everyone go and do it. It's great.
That's right. Yeah. There's our PSA. Everybody get your flu shot.
Everyone
for
get
sure.
your flu shot. Yeah, exactly. And so that's one of the things that all of the vaccine studies are doing. That's part of what they're trying to learn. And that's why these studies are planned to be so long. So for example, for the Moderna vaccine that we're working on, it's a 2-year study. For everyone who has been part of it, we are asking them to continue interacting, continue giving information to us for 2 years, because we not only want to know, okay, did it protect you right now, but does it continue to protect you? And so the reasons why we might need boosted or additional vaccines may vary. That varies depending on a pathogen. So for example, for the influenza or the flu shot, we know that the virus that is circulating in the population changes a little bit every year. And so it
mutates over time.
Mutates a little bit. It's a different strain. And so, and just depending on what happens to be around more, we tweak the vaccine to make it really recognize the parts that are out there, if that makes sense.
Yes.
That's necessarily the case with what we're thinking for COVID-19. We don't know necessarily with the virus what's going to happen over time, but it's not necessarily that we're saying, oh, the virus is going to change, so we've got to change the vaccine. It may just be that the immune response, our body's memory doesn't last as long. And we see that with other types of vaccines where we say, okay, well, you've got to get your pertussis vaccine. You have to get boosted just because over time it kind of goes away.
Or like your tetanus booster, you get that every like 10 years or so.
10 years, exactly. Yep. For that reason, just give you that little extra literal shot to keep you going.
Now, you guys are doing a longer study here. I'm sure you guys are also looking at some of the side effects just in case, because you don't want your immune system, those bouncers in your body, you don't want to go like crazy and just start throwing everybody out. People who deserve to be in the club. You don't want
let's keep them in there. Exactly.
Who need to be in the club in order to be alive. We don't want to throw them out of the party.
Exactly.
So I'm sure that's part of the 2-year, the longevity of that study too.
It absolutely is, and it's a really critical part of this study. And so when we think about clinical trials and the way vaccines are studied, they're done in parts, right? So you initially start, the first question you start asking is this safe? And you start with a small number of people. That's called a phase 1. Okay. And you figure out, is it safe and is it safe at different amounts? How much of vaccine, in this case, how much can I give you? And is it safe at those different amounts? And what's the safest amount? So that's a phase 1. And so that's done for all of these studies. Phase 2, and I'll say with a phase 1, it's a few people, right? So we start with a smaller number. Let's just get some small numbers. With a phase 2, you get a few more people, you expand that out, and you start asking slightly different questions. Okay, not only does it keep being safe, but is it working the way we think? Are we starting to see those immune triggers, that immune response that we would expect? A phase 3, which are the studies that are being talked about now, this 2-year study that we're doing at UC and UC Health, and that are being done across the globe, that's a much bigger number. So we're saying, okay, now does it really work in this way we do? But because you've gotten a bigger number, it also gives a really important opportunity to say, does it continue to be safe as we get a bigger number of people involved? And so we are constantly reaching out to our participants and saying, okay, have any of these things happened to you? And so we ask specific questions, and then we're always saying, okay, if anything else happens that's weird, you have to tell us. And we report that back. And so with all of the vaccines that have been reported, there are normal side effects that we would expect. We're not surprised by any of this. So anyone who's gone out and gotten a vaccine, afterwards, maybe your arm is a little sore, maybe you're tired the next day. There's a common, you know, misconception that, oh, I got the flu shot and then the next day I got the flu. That didn't happen. You know, what happened was your body, right? What we're doing with a vaccine is saying, okay, immune cells, go out there and fight disease, do your job. Well, when our immune cells are doing that, we don't feel very good. So we get a fever, we get fatigued, our arms hurt, you know, we get maybe redness, swelling, things like that. Maybe our joints hurt, muscles hurt. That's just your immune response being strong and saying, I'm doing my job, I'm doing my job. And it kind of hurts sometimes. And so we've been seeing that with the vaccines. There wasn't anything that was in the preliminary data, this initial data that's been reported for the phase 3, this big trial. There weren't any severe side effects that would require intervention or hospitalization, but there were some of these expected milder symptoms.
Okay. Now, you guys are, you know, you're in phase 3, you're starting to get more folks. What's going to be the next challenge in getting this out to people? Because that's the, you know, now that you have this, I know there are some vaccines, I don't think the Moderna one was one of these, but have to be, you know, under very, very, very cold temperatures. Otherwise, RNA is going to fall apart.
Ultra frozen. Exactly.
Yeah. So what are some of the next challenges for you guys as you're look to, okay, we have some, this seems to be working. It seems to be, you know, keeping people from getting very sick. What's the next step then?
Yeah.
What's going to be the challenge
and that's
there?
a great question, and everyone's asking it, right? So we got this really great data that came out, and, you know, it took a moment to be thankful, but then it's,
Yes.
well, right? So
how do I get one of these?
How do I get it? Exactly. So what the studies have to do, so what the people running these trials and responsible for the vaccine have to do is ask for approval to use it, right? So they will continue to collect data over time, but they give that data to a whole variety of regulatory agencies and saying, okay, look at our data. This is working. It seems to be safe. Can we use it? And so that's what's called the emergency use authorization. You'll hear people say, oh, they're going to go for an EUA. That's the study's going to be doing that. What we now across the country have to be figuring out to do is, okay, once they get that and we can actually get the vaccine, how do we get it to the people? And so you are exactly right. The different vaccines that are the kind of the front runners that have the most data at this time have different storage requirements and different administration requirements. So that will be a big challenge. So some of the vaccines do require this ultra freezing. So they have to be kept at -70 to -80 degrees. Yes,
that's
very
cold.
And as you can imagine, that's not a freezer that a lot of people have sitting around.
No, you can't put it in the chest freezer in the garage.
Just throw it in there, exactly. And so even our places that usually have vaccines don't usually have freezers like that. So that's definitely something that is being considered as all of the different states. The CDC has tasked, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has tasked states with figuring out their plan. And so that's what everyone is working on. So in Ohio, there are 3 zones, and Cincinnati falls into zone 3. And so we have had people meeting for months thinking, okay, once this goes, what is it going to look like? How are we going to have it? You know, distribution centers, who's going to be involved? Not all vaccines need that. So the Moderna vaccine does require being frozen for if you want the longest storage. However, it is what we would say stable, like you said about worrying about this mRNA breaking down. It is stable in a refrigerator and is even stable for about a day out being thawed. So we've taken it out. And so that's a really important thing, because you can imagine we're going to take it out of the freezer and go out and have a big vaccination day, right?
Yeah.
And take some of the doses out, and we know that it's stable.
So you can even, so this vaccine, you know, you could put in a refrigerator next to like your ice cream if you needed to for a little bit, and it would be still okay. Or even like put it in the refrigerator, you know, next to the leftovers from Thanksgiving, and it'll still
And it would still be
cool.
okay if we thought those were all safe things to do. I will put a plug in there that we don't put drug next to our food.
Oh yeah.
But that idea, that this idea of
or samples or
or
specimens.
samples, let's keep everything separate. But exactly. So, we have, a refrigerator or a freezer that goes down to what, negative 20 degrees Celsius. That's what we would think of as a normal freezer or
Okay.
a refrigerator. So all of, pharmacies, retail pharmacies, hospitals, even hospitals that are far away from a large academic center or something, would have a freezer or a refrigerator where they could store this. And so that is really important.
So so the infrastructure
Yeah.
for a lot of these distribution centers, or where you would get
Yeah.
your flu shot, they're already kind of there, and that makes
They're
it
there.
a lot easier
Exactly.
to get out to people, to get people vaccinated.
And so everyone thinks about, the competition between these companies of, oh, my vaccine versus your vaccine, or does it matter, right? We are going to need a lot of different options. And so that's what will be important in thinking, okay, this vaccine requires this type of storage. So maybe we're going to send it to these sites where they have this storage, whereas this one requires this type of storage. And so we're going to send it here. And so it's going to be a lot of coordination and thinking about what vaccine will be best in what setting.
Okay.
And so it's really promising that the vaccines are all looking similarly very good, right? So it's saying, okay, we've got a lot of options. This is great.
Yeah. So now just to be clear, the vaccines, they they immunize you from getting sick with COVID, but that doesn't mean you can't spread it, correct?
Yeah.
So even if you got a vaccine, you still need to do the things like wear a mask in public for a while,
Yeah.
keep on social distancing. We can't go to any rock concerts or anything like that.
Right. It's not necessarily
because you could still get
a free
infected.
pass.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
could still be
so
infected and pass it on to people who haven't got their vaccine yet, and that could be really dangerous.
exactly. So that's a really good point. And so when we think about studies, we separate the ways we know it's something successful by saying a primary and a secondary. So you say a primary endpoint. What's the first thing we want to know? What's the most important? We're going to figure this part out. But then there's always things called secondary. So what else do I want to know? If I'm collecting data, let's learn something else. And so the other things that we're trying to learn is not only does it prevent disease. So I got infected and I got symptoms. I would call that disease, COVID-19. I had disease. The other things the studies will be looking at is, does it just prevent infection or asymptomatic? So we're saying, okay, you're carrying the virus, but maybe you don't know it, right? And so they will be hoping to gather information about that as well. Does it help reduce just SARS-CoV-2 infection? Unfortunately, we don't have that data yet. So the data that's been released on these studies is just about, one, causing disease. Do people with a vaccine versus not, are they more likely or less likely to get sick? And then if they do get sick, is it severe disease? So we know our hospitals, unfortunately, now are just full of patients who have really severe disease. And so that's another question. And the preliminary data for the Moderna study that we've done suggests that the vaccine not only helps prevent any disease, but also helps prevent severe disease. There were 11 cases in the study, the data that they have, there were 11 cases of severe disease. None of them were in participants who had gotten the vaccine. So that does suggest.
That's good.
So that is really important too, because again, it's another misconception about the influenza vaccine, right? I'll hear people say to me, well, I got the flu shot last year and then I still got the flu, so it didn't work. Well, maybe, and we can't ever say for sure, but maybe your flu wasn't as bad as what it could have been. And so that's why we still encourage that even if it doesn't prevent just the infection or some type of disease, it likely still helps your body respond stronger and that you don't get as sick. So that's why it's still really important. And it's not the right train of thought of, well,
Right.
got it, so it didn't work. Well, it probably helped you from getting as sick as you could have been. And so that's a still important feature of this.
So what has been your role in this study as a scientist here at UC Health?
Yeah, so the vaccine itself was made by this company, so Moderna, and working with the federal government. So NIH, National Institute of Health, and specifically the group of scientists who work with infectious diseases. So they made the vaccine, and they've been working really hard on this and put all of that together. In order to test it, though, you need to get it out into the community, out into the country. And so the way a lot of clinical trials work is you get sites, we call ourselves sites, throughout the country that say, okay, we are going to work with you on this job and we're going to all do the same thing. So the goal is we do the same protocol, we do it exactly the same way so that the data is consistent coming in.
Because your controls.
We're controls, and we've got controls, and we're following the rules, and it's everyone does it the same way. And so we enroll our community members. So our site at the University of Cincinnati was one of them. So across the country, the goal was to enroll 30,000 participants. And so we were ones who said, okay, we'll help. And we tried to enroll participants from Cincinnati community. So our role, there's myself. So I am a PhD trained scientist. So my background is in what's called clinical microbiology. So all of these infectious things and the way that we try to find them and get rid of them and figure out how they're causing disease. I work with my counterpart and colleague, Dr. Carl Fichtenbaum. He is one of our infectious disease physicians at the University of Cincinnati and has done a lot of clinical trial work. So he and I worked very closely together with an amazing research team. There are so many people who are involved in getting research studies going. So for anyone out there who thinks this might be for me, there are so many different ways that you can be involved. And so we've got coordinators who help interact with the patients and the participants and say, they meet with them in all of their study visits and say, okay, how are you feeling today? We're going to go over this study. I'm going to explain all the things about this study too. There's a lot of personal engagement and really connecting with people and making sure that our participants feel comfortable, that their questions are answered. We have pharmacists involved, we have nurses involved, we have physicians who are involved in overseeing and talking with patients and making sure they're safe throughout the whole study. We have had incredible community outreach people involved. So people helping us getting this message out in the community in multiple languages. So that was a big part of our study, is making sure we had a diverse and inclusive enrollment. So we have individuals who are messaging in Spanish and are able to consent in Spanish. We have really reached out to different communities, making sure everyone feels comfortable. So
that's probably really helpful because people, you really got to have a pretty strong bond of trust with folks who are gonna, if they're gonna try something that's never been done before in medicine. I mean, you're taking you're kind of gambling with your body for the greater good of humanity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a risk and it's a sacrifice. You need to feel
yes.
safe, and you need to feel that the people looking out for you and watching over you have your best interest. And so thankfully, the infectious disease research unit at the University of Cincinnati has a really long history of engaging with the community on clinical trials in general. And so we were able to use a lot of that connection. The history associated with studying science, especially in Black and African American communities, is not
good.
It's not good. And scientists have done terrible things. And so there's a lot of mistrust, especially in that community, that's completely valid. And so a lot of our work and continues to be that let's hear your concerns. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure you feel safe. But we wanted to do that so that also people would feel like the study reflected them, right? it's going to be so important that people trust this vaccine and feel like, yeah, it's going to work for me. People were thinking about me in this. And so we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive without making anyone feel targeted and making them feel like we were taking advantage of them.
That's awesome. Well, I'm gonna switch back to my question. Like, what did you do in all these things? Because you deflected on everyone, what everybody else did.
Any of that. Right. So what
which is all great things.
What I did was actually help coordinate all of that. And so my job was really working closely with the study team. I helped build databases so that we could get information in, so that we could communicate with our participants. I've helped figure out the schedules. I've helped with community engagement. And so from a investigator standpoint, without the MD, I'm not seeing the patients. I'm not being involved in their care. Dr. Fichtenbaum is really the one who does that component. My job is to try to pull together all of the other pieces so that we can make it work and help with the messaging, you know, reaching out to the community, making sure people understand this in all sorts of ways. So it's been diverse and is been an exciting ride for me to be involved in this. That's
awesome. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for taking the time out of, can only imagine your extremely busy life, and chatting with me and sharing all the wonderful things. And thank you for the work that you're doing. It's life-saving, and I can't wait to not just get my vaccine, but to get my parents vaccinated, you know, and immunized, especially my dad, because he's not careful and he just wanders around places and you never really know where he is. So I want to.
Well, and there's so many people. I mean, I think one, I'll say, you know, I appreciate you saying the thanks, and but I have just been amazed by everyone who's been willing to do this. And I'm sorry, my cat has now joined the conversation, so my camera's moving a bit here. But you know,
it wouldn't be a remote call without a cat cameo trying to knock everything off.
Exactly. So you know, there's been so many people who have been involved. There's so many people, and that's what I continue to be amazed about when I hear stories. How everyone, no matter what job you are doing, no matter even if you're just staying home, that's doing your part, right?
Yes.
So, you know, we appreciate the acknowledgement. We also recognize how many people are involved. So thank you.
Yes.
We are so excited that Cincinnati has gotten to be part of the solution. That's what this is really about, right?
That's right.
We're being part of the solution and really taking some of our power and our control back in a time that feels very uncontrolled and scary. So thank you for helping us get the message out and for talking about it. This is so fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you everyone for watching, and everybody stay safe. Wear your masks, wash your hands, you know, stay at home as much as you possibly can. And we'll see you next time on Science Around Cincy. All right, okay.